Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Maryland Risk Management Education Podcast. My name is Paul Geringer, and I'm the Extension Legal Specialist here in the Department of Ag and Resource Economics. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how to make a citizen's arrest. I'm often asked a simple question during workshop sessions. Do I have the right to make a citizen's arrest in Maryland? Many of you may not ask me that question that way, but that's the gist of what the questions is. And as I can point out to many of you that you already know, you may live in rural areas and have concerns about trespassers coming on your property, such as kids on ATVs, kids on horses, kids on, other things, neighbors who may not respect property boundaries as well. Or you may have thieves stealing materials from your farm. And in these cases and others where you are witness to the crime, you may wonder if you have the right just to detain the person until local law enforcement comes. The answer is almost always, if you've seen this writing that I'm looking at to do this before, the answer is always, almost always. Maybe sometimes don't do it. Just call 911 instead. The reason for the answer is complex. Please never attempt to make a citizen's arrest. I'm not sure I can state enough that attempting this is a bad idea. Law enforcement officers really never recommend that you make a citizen's arrest. If you think you are witnessing a crime, always contact local law enforcement to make the arrest. To make a citizen's arrest is to put your own life potentially in danger, the lives of others in danger, and everything that you own, including your farm, potentially at risk. Law enforcement officers have governmental immunity when making arrests and are trained to make arrests properly. You don't have such immunity. If the local prosecutor chooses not to prosecute the perpetrator, a likely outcome for simple trespass in many cases, or if the alleged perpetrator is not convicted, that leaves you open to a civil suit for false imprisonment, potentially among with other torts. That's right, the perpetrator could actually sue you. False imprisonment is an intentional tort that entitles a jury to award punitive damages and could force you to sell the farm to cover damages. But with everything I've just said, let's talk about what happens if you actually do want to make a citizen's arrest. The Maryland's Court of Appeals has found that at common law, private citizens and peace officers have the right to make arrests of those suspected of committing crimes. In Maryland, in order to have the authority to make a citizen's arrest, a private citizen must meet some of these qualifications. And I'm going to talk about 3 qualifications that you need to meet, in not all of them, but you need to meet most of them. A felony such as murder in the first degree or theft of at least $1,000, to name a few felonies, was committed in their presence. 2, the public citizen has reasonable grounds to believe the detained person committed a felony. Or 3, the person committed a misdemeanor, such as trespass, theft under $1,000, to name a few, which amounts to a breach of the peace in the presence or sight of the arresting citizen. In making these arrests, force must not be used. Deadly force may never be used. If the person flees your property, you should not pursue, but allow law enforcement to pursue. As stated above, if the person is not convicted or you used excessive force, you are open to a potentially successful lawsuit against you by the person you detained. Remember, you could be forced to sell the farm to cover litigation expenses and damages. Law enforcement officers have qualified immunity that protects them from liability when performing discretionary duties such as arresting individuals. Law enforcement officers also have the right to use deadly force when making an arrest if the situation justifies it, although they use every effort to avoid using deadly force. As a private citizen, you do not. For example, Charlie witnesses Doug taking photos of Charlie's poultry houses and assumes Doug is trespassing and with a local animal rights group. In reality, Doug is getting into the poultry industry, and Charlie's wife gave Doug permission to be on the property to take photos. Charlie grabs Doug, restrains Doug, and holds Doug in his car until the police arrive. Police realized the mistake and let Doug go. Doug could press criminal charges against Charlie for assault, battery, kidnapping, and may have other civil claims such as civil torts of false imprisonment, battery, and others as a result of the detention by Charlie. Charlie could possibly have to sell the farm in order to cover the litigation costs and damages associated with a simple mistake. Popular culture often neglects this aspect of citizen's arrest, but you would be wise to consider it. Although in Maryland you have the right to perform a citizen's arrest, having the right does not mean you should ever exercise it. In addition to all of these above, the alleged perpetrator may be armed, be a better shot than you, or just lucky on that day that make you first and that could make your first citizen's arrest your last citizen's arrest. So these are things to consider in this process. Thank you again for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at lgoering@umd.edu. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.